I learned a lot working in this Red Gardens project last year, as I have every season. Some of the things I learned I was not aware of before, and other things I was aware of but I hadn't had direct experience of. And a number of other things I've learned or experienced before, but this past season offered me a different variation to learn from, or I needed yet another lesson to help it sink in. And once again, I think it's useful to look back over last year and to pick out a number of different things that I think that I learned as an interesting way to review a season. Last spring, when transplanting the courgette or zucchini plants, as well as the squash plants, into 5 different gardens, I doubled up on the layers of protective cover in order to shelter these tender plants from the cold and windy weather. I also added containers of water as a type of thermal mass, hoping that it will keep things a bit warmer overnight, and I kept this protection in place for almost 4 weeks until the weather really improved. I was impressed with the difference between the growth of the plants that had better coverage compared to those with less protection, and the harvest at the end of the season reflected this. I plan to use this extra protection again this season, and to plant these crops even earlier in the spring to get the most out of our cool growing season. We occasionally get late spring frosts right up until the end of May, which can kill tender plants in the outside gardens if they're not protected, but are usually light enough to not damage similar plants in the polytunnel. This is because the temperature typically drops below freezing for a brief period just before dawn, but in the first week of May last year we had an unusually strong frost, with temperatures below freezing for most of the night. This caused a lot of damage to the well-established tomato plants in my larger polytunnel, killing back quite a few of the plants. To prevent this happening again, I plan to use horticultural fleece to cover any tender, heat-loving plants in the polytunnel whenever the temperatures get even close to freezing, and I suspect that this might even help increase their growth rate in the spring. Like many growers, I never seem to be able to produce enough compost, which has been a significant constraint for developing all the growing spaces of this project. And since I switched the method of managing the no-dig garden to using a deep layer of compost on the surface, I needed even more. So last year, I bought in a lot of compost for the first time, something that I've really resisted doing in the past, mainly for use in the no-dig garden, but also to supplement the supplies for the other growing spaces. I wasn't overly impressed with the quality of this compost, but it seemed to do the job, with a lot less work than making it myself, and I plan to buy in more again this season. I grew an overwintering green manure mix in my larger polytunnel last year, and was amazed with how tall it grew. I don't have a lot of experience with growing these types of soil building crops, and I don't think I used the best method for killing off the crop and incorporating the substantial amount of biomass it produced. I let it grow too long, cut it back too late, and the biomass that I left on the soil surface dried out and took too long to break down. I didn't anticipate these and other issues, but that is all part of the learning process of trying to figure out how to add these soil improving crops into the management of my gardens. I had 2 types of crops infected with forms of downy mildew last year, with very different results. The large spring crop of spinach in the polytunnel suddenly developed spots on the leaves, and I thought I had lost the crop. But then the mildew didn't spread anymore, and apart from a bit of extra work sorting the leaves, these plants continued to produce a great crop. On the other hand, all of the onions in the outside gardens were affected by another form of mildew, which continued to spread and seriously reduce the yield and storability of this crop. In one case, the problem disappeared without me intervening, and in the other case, it was the worst disease infection that I've had in the gardens. For years, I've been watering the gardens by hand, which in rainy Ireland isn't much of a problem for the outside gardens, but watering the plants in the polytunnel has taken quite a bit of time and effort in the past. I have used a drip line watering system in my newer polytunnel for several seasons, and finally installed a sprinkler system in my older polytunnel last spring. And after the unusually dry conditions of the previous summer, I also switched to using a movable line of sprinklers for the outside gardens. I still do some watering by hand, but I'm delighted at how easy it's been to keep the gardens well watered this past season, both inside and outside. I decided to try growing microgreens for the first time last year, but I wasn't really expecting much as I thought that these were a bit of a low-yielding novelty crop. But then I tried growing them directly in the soil of the polytunnel, and I realized they could be a really productive crop. Because of the fast turnover from sowing to harvest, Quite a few crops could be sown in a season in the same piece of ground, potentially producing more per square meter than most of the other crops that I grow. This is slightly unfair, as microgreens are produced mainly by releasing the energy and nutrients contained in the seeds that were grown elsewhere. But it's still an impressive and productive type of crop. I have been growing the same variety of main crop storage carrots for years, and last season's crop was quite good for the most part. The biggest roots and one of the largest yields came from the widely spaced plants of the extensive garden, which were also the easiest to manage. I didn't expect such large roots to taste as good as the smaller ones, but when I did a randomized taste test of the same variety of carrots from 6 different gardens, this batch of carrots was ranked the best tasting by 16 people. It seems that this one crop of large carrots may have achieved that difficult result of being the highest yielding, easiest to manage, and best tasting. With a variety of different gardens, it's interesting to see how the same vegetable transplants can do better or worse in different growing conditions or locations. There are various reasons for this difference in growth, and one that was quite prominent last year was how close new transplants were to more established plants due to the layout or method of the different gardens. The later season brassicas, such as cabbages, were distinctly smaller when planted beside the more established Brussels sprouts plants, and they never really caught up. There was also an issue with the courgette or zucchini plants interplanted among established earlier crops, and larger brassicas transplanted among the broadcast sowing of greens, which is a significant issue that I need to sort out with the polyculture garden. I've been trying to get into the habit of weeding much more effectively and more regularly, trying to get rid of the weeds when very young. There are a number of different types of tools that can help with this, but I remember reading about the possibility of making a simple weeder out of a piece of wire that is hammered flat. I tried it out and was surprised with how easy it was to make and how well it worked. I have experimented with making several other variations and realized that I could easily adapt the process to produce different shapes and sizes for many different situations. I have wanted to make biochar for years, but never got around to it, partially because I thought I needed to buy or make a retort or kiln for producing the charcoal with a controlled burn. Then I came across a method developed and used by a number of other people that uses a simple pit cone dug into the ground and a fairly straightforward method for managing the burn so that lots of charcoal could be easily produced. I tried out this method last spring and really liked how effective and adaptable it was, as well as being quite enjoyable. While other methods could allow better or more refined quality of charcoal to be produced, or that can capture additional products from the burning process, this low-tech method really works in my situation. I have several polytunnels, which are really valuable spaces to grow in, especially in this cool maritime climate, but I have been concerned about the use of plastic, especially from a climate perspective. So last year, I tried to calculate how much greenhouse gas emissions could have been released to manufacture and ship my newer polytunnel frame and plastic to me. The emissions were lower than I expected them to be, and even with a worst-case scenario, the overall emissions for the full life cycle of the plastic and frame were less than the emissions from driving to the local town once a week to buy groceries. Plastic does have its issues, but growing more local food throughout the year could be one of the best uses of this potentially problematic but really useful material. Last year, once again, I failed to keep up with all the work in the family scale gardens and wasn't able to further develop the larger area of the black plot. My plans are probably always going to exceed my capacity, especially as I spend more and more time making these videos, and I've known for a while that I could use some help managing the gardens. Thankfully, a friend in my community wanted to take the opportunity to radically reskill, to really learn how to grow food, and is going to work with me in the gardens for the rest of the season. With her help, the gardens are already in great shape for the start of the season, and it looks like we'll be able to manage all of the existing gardens much more effectively, establish a lot more growing space, and do a lot more exploring. As a result, it looks like it's going to be a great year for this project, with a lot more opportunities for growing and for learning. Aside from all these things that I learned last year, and a lot more that I didn't include, I've discovered a few things about these videos and this YouTube channel. I've received quite a bit of feedback from people about how much they value the honesty and openness that forms the basis of a lot of my videos, and about the integrity that they see in my work and in this project. Last year, I was offered a wildlife camera to try out on the condition that I included it in one of my videos. And although I quite like the camera, and I think I was able to integrate it quite well into a video, it really felt at odds with this integrity that I wanted to continue to work with. I've been offered other products and equipment to try since then, but I've declined these offers and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future, as it doesn't feel like a good fit with the independence and nature of exploration of this project. Recently, I've also started to receive offers of sponsorship, which is an interesting sign that this YouTube channel is developing nicely, and I was quite surprised with how much was offered, even for a small channel like this one. I can see why so many YouTubers include sponsorship messages in their videos, as it's no doubt a significant part of their income, and it allows them to be able to create great content. And while it would definitely add a much needed boost to the income I can get from this channel, and allow me to invest a lot more time and resources into this project and making more videos, I'm not going to accept any of these sponsorship offers, at least for the foreseeable future. Who knows what the future might bring, but for now I'm going to stick with selling some vegetables, teaching a few courses, getting some ad revenue from YouTube, and of course my Patreon and PayPal accounts, as the ways that I'm going to use to fund this project and allow me to make videos about it all. I really want to thank those people who have already been supporting my work and this channel with their generous contributions through Patreon and PayPal. I couldn't continue with this channel without you. If you like my videos and you value the work that I do, it would be great if you would consider joining them, but most importantly, thank you for watching.